Hi there, my name's Nick Dutch, and I'm talking today about essentially parapsychology, and I'm going to try and provide the more skeptical point of view first before we go into something which is, I suppose, more sciencey in particular. The first thing that I'm going to do is to say that I'm going to do some videos on Gans field and the Gans field effects and experiments. And before I do that, I just want to clear up a few points. It's often said that correlation does not prove causation. Yeah, that might be true, but it also depends upon the quality of the correlation. A lot of the scientific work that's been done into psi phenomenon has been based upon statistical analysis, and that has a strong correlation component to it. Okay, we might not be able to say what the mechanism is, but we might be able to say that the correlation is sufficiently significant or sufficiently consistent for us to be able to say there's something happening here, but we can't quite say what. Now it says here on the Wikipedia page, correlations can suggest a possible causal connection or a mechanistic relationship. However, statistical dependence is not sufficient to demonstrate the presence of such relationship. Okay, but it says that we can suggest the possible causal relationship. It also says here that correlations are useful because they can indicate a predictive relationship that can be exploited in practice. So if the causal relationship, the apparent causal relationship, is sufficiently consistent, then you can say that if you're putting factor A into the equation, then you are more likely to get the result B. So although it's not necessarily indicative of what the mechanism is, it is saying that you can use that one particular factor that you put into the experimental design in order to bring about the particular result. So although we can't say what the mechanism is, we can say that the result is there if you do X, Y, and Z, basically. So correlations themselves are in fact not only useful, but they're essential. And taking into account that we're talking about a skill, it would make more sense to suggest that the correlations do suggest that there is a mechanism there. Alright, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about Susan Blackmore. Now Susan Blackmore is someone who is a paranormal investigator or researcher, but she's also very skeptical. Now I'm just going to bring up one of her papers here, because she's got some very important points. She's a skeptic, and in this particular paper this particular essay that I'm linking to, she provides basically her point of view. What I find most interesting about her writing is the fact that she relies upon her own personal experience. Now, personal experience might be important, but it certainly isn't scientific, and you can't use personal experience as a way of laying down the law as to precisely what is or what is not happening. Alright, that's called a common sense analysis. And common sense is essentially the antithesis of science, because it's based upon opinion, it's based upon limited information. She also goes on to say that the Gans field experiments are ripe with opportunities for fraud, but this particular essay doesn't say precisely what they are. And also, just because something has the opportunity for fraud doesn't necessarily mean to say that there is fraud in it. For instance, I had a cup of tea earlier on today, and I boiled the water using my electric kettle. And I can tell you this, I can show you the electric kettle, I can show you how I did it. But you might turn around to me and say, yeah, but I know you've got a gas stove as well. So there's now a doubt that you actually use your electric kettle to boil the water. I mean, that's the same thing. It's spreading the seeds of doubt. However, the actual data which has come out of the Gans field tests are in fact really rather incredible and demonstrate that there is something hypothetically happening there. Yeah, there are all kinds of implications for what could possibly happen with the psi research in the future. But on the other hand, surely at this period in our history, the first thing to do is to evaluate whether there is a apparent phenomena and a apparent result, and to see in what ways this particular phenomena and this particular result appear to occur, and move things on from there. She's come out with an interesting statement here. And she says, similar problems occur in all areas of parapsychology. The CIA recently released details of more than 20 years of research into remote viewing, and a new debate erupted over these results, including Hyman 1995, Utz 1995. Whenever strong claims are made, critics from both inside and outside of parapsychology get to work as they should, but rarely is a final answer forthcoming. Well, the salient feature of that particular statement is strong claims. Why should we even bother to make strong claims? Why don't we just say that this, that and the other happened under this, that and the other circumstances? We've got to approach this in a very practical way in order for us to get closer to the truth. I mean, I find it difficult when I'm dealing with young people who use the phrase magic works, or telepathy works, or psychic phenomena works, because the very use of the word works is not only a strong claim, but it's a strong claim which is suggesting that the end result is as reliable as switching on a light switch. And so as a result of that, there's far too many issues associated with the words that they're using and the message that they're trying to communicate. Susan Blackmore then goes on to say that if the question was posed to her, are there any paranormal phenomena, she says, I can only give a personal and biased answer. That is, probably not. Well, why can you only give a personal and biased answer? The bottom line is, why can you only give a personal and biased answer? You can look objectively at the data, you can take into account what a correlation is there for and how it can be used, and yes, you can improve the experimental designs you've used for the Auto-Gansfield tests, and see how many factors that could possibly bring about fraud can be being removed. So why is Susan Blackmore using this phrase? Now, within a scientific debate, it's a political experience. You've got two camps. They're arguing to try and promote a particular message or to try and make people think in a certain way. So she is supporting one particular camp of people. The precise reasons for this, I couldn't say. I can say that I don't believe that she's being honest. And I don't believe that she's being honest because she's providing a personal and biased answer. She is basing everything upon her own personal experience. She is not looking more closely at the experimental designs and seeing what else could actually be happening there. So as far as are the skeptics right or are the skeptics wrong, I would have to suggest that the skeptics themselves have arguments which are flawed. I mean, if you think about what Wiseman said about the remote viewing experiments which came out of, I think it was America, the CIA. He says that in accordance with the standards of any other science, remote viewing has been proven. But, he says, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And at this time we don't have the extraordinary evidence. Well, that's again another very unscientific statement, because what is extraordinary evidence is something which is rather subjective, and what is an extraordinary claim is also rather subjective. And if it is something which is subjective, it is not scientific. Now, if you don't understand the mechanism, but the correlation is reliable and predictive, then something is happening, but we can try and work out what factors have brought about the apparent results. And that's more about what I'll be talking about in subsequent videos on this channel. But one of my messages to you today is that just because there are skeptical arguments out there, it doesn't mean to say that they are good, nor does it mean to say that they are scientific. And if it comes from a scientist, it doesn't necessarily mean to say that it is an authoritative source. So yes, we need skepticism, genuine skepticism, of the skeptical interpretations, as well as the non-skeptical interpretations. We've also got to think very carefully about the words which are being used. We've got to think very carefully about the strong positive claims, and we've got to try and erode those out of ESP culture or ESP type society, and thus to become people who can get slowly closer to the truth.